Sir, are you okay? You don't have to be okay, but you don't have to be alone either. The man on the bench outside Harwell Financial Tower had his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands, and he was not making any sound, which was somehow worse than if he had been. The plaza was full of the lunchtime movement of a city that does not slow down for private grief, and not one person in the stream had stopped. Wren Calloway stopped. She was 27 years old, wearing her dental brace on her lower teeth, the corrective kind, the practical kind, the kind you wear when you were 27 and finally able to afford the orthodontist your mother couldn't manage when you were 14, and carrying a paper bag lunch because the cafe near her data entry job charged $8 for a sandwich, and she had learned to make her own. She had been walking back from the park bench where she ate every Tuesday and Thursday, and she had seen the man and felt the thing she always felt when she saw someone in genuine distress and everyone else kept walking. A quiet, non-negotiable pull toward the person the world had decided not to notice. She sat down beside him at a careful distance, not close enough to crowd, close enough to be real. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his eyes were the kind of tighter that has nothing to do with sleep. He was 33 years old, well-dressed in the understated way of someone who stopped needing to signal success a long time ago, and he had been crying in the private, contained way of a man who has had a great deal of practice not being seen doing it. His name was Garrison Aldane. He was the founder and executive chairman of Aldane Capital, a private equity firm whose name was known in financial circles in a way that his face, deliberately, was not. He had spent 11 years building something significant and had learned early that visibility was a liability and that the best kind of power was the quiet kind. He was not accustomed to being seen in any condition except the composed, decisive one he had constructed and maintained with considerable effort. He had been sitting on this bench for 22 minutes because his phone call 23 minutes ago had been from his doctor. "I'm fine," he said. Then, because she was still sitting there and the sentence had landed dishonestly, "I'm not fine, but I don't know you."
"You don't have to know me," Wren said. "I'm just going to sit here for a minute." He looked at her, this young woman with a paper lunch bag and a dental brace, and the specific quality of unhurried presence that belongs to people who give attention without calculating the cost, and felt something in the carefully constructed architecture of his composure develop a small, honest crack. "I got some news," he said. "Medical news. I'm still figuring out what it means." She didn't ask what kind. She didn't offer reassurance she didn't have the information to give. She said, "That's a hard thing to sit with alone." "Yes," he said, "it is." They sat together for 11 minutes. She didn't fill the silence with anxious conversation. She didn't perform empathy or produce advice. She simply remained, present, unhurried. A stranger who had decided that a person in pain on a public bench deserved at least one other person willing to share the bench with them. When she stood to go back to her job, she said, "I hope the news turns out to be manageable, and I hope you have people to tell it to." He looked up at her. "Thank you," he said, and it came out in a voice she would not have predicted from his appearance, quiet, genuine, carrying the full weight of what the words actually meant. She walked back to her office. She didn't think much more about it. Garrison sat on the bench for another 10 minutes after she left. He thought about the medical news, a cardiac irregularity, detected early, likely manageable, frightening nonetheless. And he thought about the 11 minutes of someone simply sitting beside him without agenda. He could not remember the last time someone had done that. He had people, a team, associates, a personal assistant who managed to schedule with military precision. But he did not, he understood sitting on that bench, have people who would sit down beside him on a public bench and stay without being asked, and leave without asking for anything. He had built an empire. He had not, it appeared, built a life with enough of the right people in it. He didn't forget her face.
His assistant, Clara, was thorough and discreet and had been with him for 6 years. He described the young woman, approximate age, paper bag lunch, the dental brace, the building she had walked toward, and asked Clara to find out who she was, because he wanted to send a proper thank you. Clara found her in 2 days. Wren Calloway, 27, data entry specialist at Aldane Capital's third-floor administrative vendor. She had been contracted through an agency for 8 months. Her file showed consistent, excellent work and zero recognition. Garrison read the file. Then he read it again. Then he called his HR director and asked 3 questions about her role, her compensation, and what she was actually qualified to do. The answers to the last question surprised him. She had a degree in business analytics, completed while working 2 jobs and living with her mother on the West Side. She had applied for 2 analyst positions at the firm through the agency and been redirected back to data entry both times without explanation. He called his HR director back with 4 words: "Fix that, today." What followed was not a fairy tale, it was a process. Proper interviews, skills assessments, a direct conversation between Ren and the analytics team manager that went 2 hours over its scheduled time because she kept having things worth saying. She was offered a junior analyst position with a salary that made her sit very still in the HR office for a moment before she could respond. She did not know when she accepted who had set the process in motion. She found out 3 months later, on a Thursday afternoon when Garrison appeared at her desk, not through Clara, not announced, simply walked across the floor the way he walked everywhere, quietly and without ceremony, and said, "I wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm Garrison Aldane." She stared at him, then at the nameplate on the corner office down the hall, which she had been looking at for 3 months without connecting it to the man on the bench. "The bench?" she said. "The bench," he confirmed. A silence. Then, "You moved me into this role?" "I reviewed your file," he said carefully, "and I asked why someone with your qualifications was doing data entry. The answer was that no one had looked at the file carefully enough. I looked at it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with the directness she had always had, and which had served her in every interview and would serve her for the rest of her career, "I didn't sit with you on that bench because I thought it would lead anywhere." "I know," he said, and the way he said it, simply, with the weight of someone who has spent 3 months thinking about the difference between people who give and people who calculate, made it clear that was precisely the point. "You looked like you needed someone to stay," she said. "That's all it was." He looked at her across the desk, this young woman who had sat beside a stranger on a bench and asked nothing and given everything that mattered, and said quietly, "It was enough. It was more than enough." Kindness given freely, without expectation or audience, in the middle of a lunch break on an ordinary Tuesday, that is the kind that finds its way back, not as transaction, as recognition. The world has a way of returning to the people who stopped when everyone else kept walking. Stop, sit down, stay a minute. You never know what you are beginning. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.